Hey guys, this is Chris from Globalization Guide, and in this video I will explain to you everything you need to know about tax residencies. Your personal tax residency is one of the most important linchpins that a lot of your other setup revolves around when you choose your perfect setup for your tax optimized, maybe even tax-free global lifestyle. In many Western countries like Canada, the UK, Australia, Germany, New Zealand, tax rates, personal income tax rates can regularly exceed 50%. So your personal income tax will play a huge role in your overall tax load. The good thing is, this is one of the easiest taxes to get out of, because all of those countries I just mentioned have so-called residence-based taxation system. That means they only tax their citizens or people living in a country as long as they're still considered a resident of that country. And so the first thing when we look at tax residencies generally is how to stop being a tax resident of a specific country. And the factors that will play a role in determining your tax residency and stop being a tax resident there is at least two things, maybe three things we need to look at. Number one, the maybe most critical factor is time spent in that country. Now, you may be familiar with the 183-day rule. The 183-day rule is one of the most fundamental, maybe the most fundamental rule when it comes to determining someone's tax residency. But as we will find out soon, it is really just like a rule of thumb, and no one should just use that simple rule to determine where he's a tax resident and where he's not. The 183-day rule basically states that if a person is present in a country more than half the year, 183 days, that the person automatically becomes a tax resident in that country. And so people take this rule and they flip it around and they say, that means if I'm less than 183 days in a country, I am not a tax resident. Is this true though? It is not. There is much more to consider when determining if you're a tax resident of a country than this simple rule. And this is particularly true for your so-called domicile. We need to separate between the concept of residence and the concept of domicile. I am a German citizen, could move to France for a year and establish my residence there. I would be a non-domiciled resident. I'm not talking about tax status here, but just meaning that I'm living in a foreign country. I'm not a French citizen in that case. I don't even speak the language right now. I don't have family there. I don't have a big network of friends there. I don't have property there. I don't know furniture there. So my residency is something very limited to my legal status basically in that country. I'm legally allowed to be there. On the other hand, Germany. In Germany I grew up. I went to school. I have friends. I have, or I used to have, property, apartments, furniture, used to have a bunch of stuff there. I speak the language, and the rest of my family is still in Germany. You can see that my residential ties with that country are a lot stronger. And that country, so basically your home country, is considered your domicile. And when we look at tax residencies, there's generally three things that we need to consider. Number one, how to stop being a tax resident. This is where the journey starts. Generally, if you want to save, money, reduce your bureaucracy, and enjoy more freedom, financial freedom, freedom of movement, then you need to change your tax residency. And you need to change it from your domicile. And this is a very specific process because here a lot more factors than just mere time come into play. Time is a big factor. Let's take Germany. If I want to change my tax residency out of Germany, as I did, what are the steps I need to take? Number one, I need to spend a considerable amount of time outside of Germany. Since I left Germany in 2016, I've spent there less cumulative than, I think, 4 months over the last 2 years. And the time I spent there was very irregular. There were a few family visits, there were a few funerals and things like that, and the rest I spent outside of Germany. And this is something that is very important, especially initially. Like, if you really want to show them that you mean it, that you really mean to change the place where you live in, or you no longer want to live in your home country, then you need to make it very sure that initially you spend a considerable amount of time somewhere else. Or, this is another option, show them that you have established a new residence with new ties in another country. And then number two, the second factor when it comes to start being a resident in a country is to cut your residential ties. Residential ties being, as I just mentioned already, things like family. Well, you can cut the ties to your family, but I'll explain to you what is really required. Apartments, this is the big one. As long as you still have an apartment or a house or some place readily available for you, with a key, with furniture, with everything set up, where you can just at any time book a flight, come back and enter this home, then it will be very difficult for you to convince your tax authorities or tax authorities in your country that you really have the drive to emigrate, to leave your country, and that they should no longer consider you a resident of the country for tax purposes. So for each country, exactly what is necessary to change your tax residency out of the country varies. Canada, UK, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, they all have slightly different rules. But they generally always involve time. They always involve your residential ties. And this is something that you need to be very diligent with when you make the jump. Once you've made the jump, once you're no longer a resident, now the second question is, how can you avoid becoming a resident again? And this question applies to your domicile, the country you just left, but it also applies to any other country that you might visit now or start living in now. You don't want to go through all of the effort to stop being a resident of your home country to all of a sudden become a resident again of another country with maybe the same tax rate or even higher tax rates, or maybe even more bureaucracy and more regulations that you now have to follow. So this is the second thing. Here in this case, the 183-day rule becomes much more useful. Generally, in many countries where you're not domiciled, this is a good rule of thumb. If you're just traveling around, and especially if it's short term, if you're not, spending, let's say, 5 months, year after year after year after year in the same country, and it's potentially the country where in absolute terms you spend the most time each year. So if you spend 5 months in one country and then maybe 3 months there and 3 months there, then that's the country that, of all the countries you spend time in, could be considered your main country, your home country, your new base. So that's something you need to be aware of. And then there is a third question that sometimes comes into play, which is, how do I become a tax resident in a specific country? And this is particularly a question that is important if you want to make use of something like double taxation agreements for different company setups that you might have. If you, in some countries, when you want to switch your residency, when you want to stop being a resident, they actually require you to become a resident first of another country. So you need to make sure you're actually legally becoming a tax resident, because there is a difference between becoming a resident and becoming a tax resident. A residence is generally just a residence permit. And that is the right for you, for the residence permit holder, to spend the determined time in that country. It doesn't necessarily make you a tax resident. Most countries, when it comes to a tax residency, actually apply the 183-day rule pretty strict. So that means even in countries where it's possible to get a residence permit very quickly, and where it doesn't take much to maintain that residence permit, for example in Panama, a tax resident where you actually require to file income tax reports and you get a so-called tax certificate, you only get that in Panama, for example, after you've been in the country for 6 months. And so even though you have a residence there, a permanent residence, doesn't necessarily mean you're a tax resident. And if you're coming from a country that wants you to show that you have become a resident in another country, then just spending 2 months in Panama will not satisfy those requirements. This was a very long video. It's a very interesting topic in my opinion, but it's it has a lot of intricacies. And this is really but one of the main important questions that you need to look at when you're thinking about moving your life global, becoming a global citizen, moving around, leaving your home country either for a period of several years, maybe even long term, maybe even permanently. The tax residency is one of the most important questions that you need to look at. If you like this video, subscribe to this channel. There will be more videos like this coming. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. You'll find my email address below the video. And I'll see you soon with the next video and another interesting topic related to having this global lifestyle. So long.